Office files paperwork to sharply raise tariffs on about $200 billion of Chinese imports. The new tariffs take effect on Friday. Plus, marking 2 years in office, President Moon Jae-in will outline his administration's future direction on a range of issues from politics and the economy to North Korea on live TV this evening. Our top story this morning, the United States has reiterated its position on North Korea. Maximum pressure, but it has stressed it will not intervene if South Korea decides to provide humanitarian aid to the north. Now, reports show North Korea is suffering from the worst food crisis in a decade. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders told reporters Wednesday that Washington's primary focus remains North Korea's denuclearization, adding it will continue with its maximum pressure campaign against the regime. Seoul's presidential office said Wednesday that President Trump had expressed support for South Korea's possible humanitarian assistance to North Korea during a phone call with President Moon Jae-in earlier that evening. Now, officials from South Korea, the US and Japan meet in Seoul on this Thursday to discuss military cooperation and regional security issues, with North Korea's recent firing of projectiles into the sea likely to top the agenda. Seoul's defense ministry says the 11th defense trilateral talks will be attended by South Korea's Deputy Minister for National Defense Policy, Jung Sok-hwan, and his US and Japanese counterparts Randall Shriver and Takeshi Ishikawa, as well as the US State Department's acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Japan and Korean Affairs, Mark Napper. Before that, bilateral talks between the US and Japan will be held at the US Embassy here in Seoul. These talks come at a time when military relations between South Korea and Japan have soured after Tokyo claimed a South Korean warship locked its radar onto a low-flying Japanese maritime patrol aircraft late last year. Seoul strongly denies that claim. Now, we have North Korea's first response to its surprise firing of projectiles last weekend. It describes the launches as part of a normal and self-defensive training, arguing that such training is different in nature from war drills. Kim Hyo-sun has this report.
North Korea's foreign ministry issued a statement on Wednesday saying its firing of short-range projectiles off its east coast last Saturday was part of, quote, regular and self-defensive training.
The recent drill conducted by our army is nothing more than part of the regular military training, and it has neither targeted anyone nor led to an aggravation of a situation in the region.
A foreign ministry spokesperson commented on the military activity while addressing questions from a journalist from North Korea's state-run media. The spokesperson was quoted as saying that any country can carry out military drills for the sake of national defense, adding that denying the right to such drills will result in consequences that no one would want to see.
Only a regular and self-defensive military drill is branded as provocative, and this is an undisguised manifestation of the attempt to press the gradual disarmament of our state and finally invade us. We think this is very much unpleasant and regrettable, and we sound a note of warning.
Words like missiles or rockets were not mentioned in the statement. Such a response seems to be aimed at South Korea, which issued a relatively muted response to the launch, but warned the exercise went against the intent of the 2018 Inter-Korean Military Agreement. On Tuesday, South Korea's military also urged Pyongyang to cease raising military tensions on the Korean peninsula. North Korea's statement also addressed the current state of the denuclearization negotiations, explaining the regime is remaining patient, adding there were no significant responding measures. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The US Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, is in South Korea for the first time since the North Korea-US summit in February ended without an agreement. Biegun arrived in Seoul yesterday and met with his South Korean counterpart Lee Do-hoon this morning. They discussed North Korea's recent firing of short-range projectiles and Seoul's possible provision of humanitarian food aid to the north. Biegun and Lee are to meet again on Friday for the Seoul-Washington Working Group meeting. The US envoy will also meet South Korea's ministers of foreign affairs and unification and visit the Blue House on Friday. Now, a majority of North Koreans are known to be suffering from nutritional imbalance, having access to eggs only 2 or 3 times a year. This is according to James Belgrave, spokesperson for the World Food Programme Pyongyang Liaison Office, who explained what he saw across the country as being very severe. He told South Korea's Yonhap news agency on Wednesday that he toured North Korea's 37 counties and spoke with ordinary people there. The findings come as a UN food security assessment found the North is experiencing its worst harvest in 10 years due to drought, heat waves and flooding. The report also said about 10.1 million people are suffering from severe food shortages. Now, refusing to pull any punches at all, China says it will retaliate after the US filed paperwork to sharply raise tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese goods. That will take effect on Friday local time on the tense standoff between the world's 2 economic superpowers. Here's Lee Seung-jae.
Following through on the threat made by President Trump last weekend, the U.S. Trade Representative's office has filed paperwork to formally raise tariffs to 25% from the previous 10% on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports, effective this Friday. The paperwork on the tariff hike was made on the Federal Register, the official publication used to formalize government regulations, including any change in U.S. tariff rates. China has reacted angrily to Washington's latest move, saying Beijing will retaliate if the U.S. indeed presses on with the tariff hike. China's Commerce Ministry says the escalation of trade friction is not in the interest of the 2 countries, and it deeply regrets the Trump administration's latest action. The ministry added that if the tariffs are implemented, China will have to take necessary countermeasures. Meanwhile, in a tweet on Wednesday, President Trump confirmed a Chinese delegation is on its way to Washington to reach a trade deal, adding he's very happy to raise tariffs to 25%. In the first 6 months of the government's fiscal year, the U.S. collected over $34 billion in tariffs from China. That figure could get closer to $100 billion if the tariff hike goes through as planned. Despite the uptick in trade tensions, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said Wednesday that the U.S. has received an indication that China wants to make a deal, adding they will sit down with the Chinese delegation on Thursday and see what happens from there. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, tensions look set to continue rising between Tehran and Washington after Iran's leader announced a partial withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong Yu. So we are wondering, how is the US responding to Iran's announcement?
Very strongly, Mark. U.S. President Donald Trump issued an executive order on Wednesday announcing new sanctions will be imposed on Iran's steel, aluminum, copper, and iron sectors, the key foreign currency earning sectors for Iran's economy. Iran is already known to be economically crippled, its currency value plunging to record lows and a soaring annual inflation rate due to the U.S. sanctions on their oil exports. Yet these new sanctions will be the most powerful maximum pressure campaign ever witnessed, targeting Iran's largest non-petroleum related sources of export revenue, according to a statement from President Trump. The economic crisis increased internal pressure on Iran's President Hassan Rouhani to take the counteraction of partially withdrawing from the 2015 nuclear agreement.
The JCPOA is here, and it remains in place. But today we have shown the flip side of the JCPOA coin. This is the same JCPOA that states if the other countries are failing to meet their obligations, then we can also reduce our obligations in the deal. Today, we are announcing a reduction of our obligations under the JCPOA. We are not leaving the JCPOA.
The measures include removing caps on uranium enrichment levels and resuming work on its Iraq nuclear facility. The move comes a year after the U.S. unilaterally withdrew from the deal, despite the strong objections of other signatories. The opposition Pheu Thai Party has won the most seats in Thailand's first election since a military coup in 2014, according to the official results from the Thai Election Commission. The pro-democracy party, backed by ousted former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, took 136 seats, while the ruling pro-military Palang Pracharat Party won 115. But Pheu Thai will need to form political allies with other parties because it fell short of the 250 seats needed for a majority in the lower house. Thailand has been through political turmoil from a battle between supporters of the military and the former prime minister. A vote for the next prime minister is expected to happen within a few weeks. Uber drivers are holding a massive protest worldwide as the rideshare company is set to make its initial public offering. Most of the strikes will happen in the U.S. and cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, and Chicago, to name a few. Uber drivers in London and Sao Paulo have also joined in. The drivers are unhappy with low wages, reduced fares, and more cars on the roads. This as Uber is set to publicly offer a staggering $90 billion in stocks as part of its IPO. Lyft drivers have also joined the protest.
Well, thank you very much to our Hong Yu for the world news there. Now, President Moon Jae-in is going to outline his administration's future direction on a range of issues, from politics and the domestic economy to North Korea, on live TV this evening. This comes as his administration marks 2 years in office. The one-on-one style talk show will be hosted by a KBS News reporter and will be broadcast live from Cheongwa-dae. It airs from 8:30 to 9:50 p.m. Korea time, prime time viewing. Arirang News will also be broadcasting the interview live with simultaneous English translation. Now, the mayor of Seoul, Park Won-soon, has returned from an 8-day trip to Europe and the Middle East. He's been promoting the South Korean capital and trying to attract investment, as well as looking at innovative ways to improve the lives of citizens here in the South Korean capital. Won Jong-hwan reports.
The keyword for this trip was innovative startups, one of the main tasks that Seoul's mayor has on its mind to foster economic growth. Mayor Park Won-soon visited 3 cities to build partnerships and learn the latest in innovative policies. His first stop was Abu Dhabi, where he worked on a concrete plan for the upcycle landmark scheme, which the 2 cities agreed to cooperate on last February. The scheme aims to build city-to-city partnerships on the issue of environmental sustainability, particularly focusing on fine dust. Park then headed to London, one of the world's main finance hubs, which is home to more than 5,000 financial services companies. His visit came during the city's FinTech Week, a week-long series of events and discussions on finance-related issues such as Brexit, artificial intelligence, and investment. Seoul's mayor spoke to more than 100 representatives of financial services corporations in Britain, inviting them to invest in Korea. While laying out his plans to further develop the fintech industry in Seoul's finance hub, Yeouido, he proposed funding to help international financial services companies establish branch offices in Seoul. Financial services companies with more than 4 employees that are able to attract more than $85,000 of investment can apply for free office space at the hub. For the final stop on his trip, Park visited Israel, one of the world's leaders in innovative startup businesses, to have talks with CEOs of global IT venture capital companies such as the Yozma Group. He asked for advice on policy roadmaps to make Seoul a more innovative city, while planning for cooperation between Israeli firms and firms stationed in Seoul. And to help make all this happen, the Seoul metropolitan government signed a memorandum of understanding with the largest city and financial center of Israel, Tel Aviv, on Monday to better promote friendship and cooperation between the two cities. Through this trip to Abu Dhabi, London, and Tel Aviv, Mayor Park hopes to get a better idea on how to tackle the day-to-day issues that Seoul's citizens face and improve employment, the environment, and of course, living standards. 원정환, Arirang News.
Now, it's already been dubbed the Miracle of Amsterdam. Son Heung-min and Tottenham Hotspur reached their first Champions League final on Wednesday night thanks to a last-gasp comeback in the second leg of their semi-final against Ajax. After conceding 2 first-half goals, Tottenham pretty much looked down and out, but Lucas Moura came to the rescue, scoring a hat-trick, including an injury-time winner. Although Son did not score, the South Korean winger received the second highest match rating behind the hat-trick hero. With the stunning win, the London side will face Liverpool in the final on June 1st in Madrid, and Son could become the first South Korean footballer to play in a Champions League final since Park Ji-sung did so for Manchester United in 2011. Now it's time for our Life and Info segment where we focus on information that we hope is useful for your everyday life. Today, we are going to focus on some Korean culture. For that, I'm glad to say we have our Min-sun in the studio with us. Min-sun, I hear you have some travel tips for foreigners who are planning to come to Seoul.
Right. Hi, Mark. So when people travel to another country, first thing they consider is to look for places to go. And the second thing is to find out how to get to them.
Right, because getting to places is often difficult when you arrive in a strange country, especially if you don't know anything about the language.
That's right. So for newcomers to Seoul, using the subway can be a very handy and effective way to get around the country, get around the city. So Seoul has a well-established and reliable public transportation, and subways are connected to almost every corner of the capital. And you can get from A to B for a relatively small fee. And the basic subway fare is only slightly over $1, and there's an additional fee of about 10 cents based on distance. And that's still very cheap. So if you were to take line number 1, the oldest subway line from the one end in Gyeonggi-do province to the other end in Cheonan, which is in Chungcheong-namdo province, the one-way fare is just about $3.50. So if you stay within Seoul, subway fares are super affordable. The subway is also in good condition. It's clean, fully furnished with air conditioners. It gives free Wi-Fi, and the train comes frequently and on time. Subways run non-stop from around 5:30 a.m. until midnight, but make sure to hop on the train well before midnight so you safely get to your destination without having to grab a cab.
Yeah, having to grab a cab late at night in Seoul can be quite a hassle indeed. So it's good to get the subway, and like you say, it's great. I take the subway quite often myself, going to and from work. It's very cheap and clean, like you say, especially compared to a great many big cities around the world. But if you're just here on vacation, don't be daunted. It's quite easy. There are lots of signs in English as well. But what famous hotspots are easily accessible via subway?
So Seoul offers numerous attractive tourist spots and for foreign visitors, and most of these places are reachable by a subway. So visitors can do almost everything from shopping, sightseeing, and learning more about Korean history. So for example, some well-known places are dotted along subway line 4, which is the sky blue line. The city's landmark Seoul N Tower and Myeongdong shopping districts are accessible by Chungmuro and Myeongdong station, that's on line 4. And Dongdaemun Design Plaza is also on the same line, where visitors can go to exhibitions, do some clothes shopping, or see the Dongdaemun Gate. For those who want to take a look at the history of Korea, they can get off at Icheon or Samgakji Station to go to the National Museum of Korea and the War Memorial of Korea.
Okay, so you could basically spend one day just going up and down line 4, which is the one that runs from the south to the north of the capital. But a lot of people here who live in Seoul love the Hangang River parks. There aren't that many cities around the world where you have a park right by the river that's away from the crowds of people we see in Seoul. Tell us some of the stations we should be alighting from if we want to find some of these parks.
Right. There are multiple entry points to the Hangang Park as the river runs from the west to the east side of the city. A subway station that I'd recommend getting off from is the Express Bus Terminal station. It's on line 3 and 9. Line 9 comes directly from Gimpo International Airport, and it's only a 15-minute walk to the park from the station. So it's springtime, there are beautiful flowers, and it's just nice to be outside.
Yeah.
Visitors can take a stroll or run by the river or rent a bicycle or a tandem to go a little further. And the rental cost for bikes is just $2.50 per person for 1 hour. And visitors can rent a tent for a more laid-back experience. Tents are allowed from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. at 13 specific areas. There are 2 areas in Banpo Hangang Park. And recently, the city government made a new regulation that requires tents to have at least 2 sides open to prevent any inappropriate behavior. So otherwise, violators can face a fine of about $880 US.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So make sure to keep the door open.
Yeah.
And the parks are also a really popular spot for locals wanting a break from the hustle and bustle of the city.
I usually rent a bike or walk my dog here. There are also many beautiful flowers, so I like taking pictures as well. On Fridays and Saturdays, there's a night market that comes with food trucks. I think foreign visitors can enjoy the river view when the weather is nice and have fun here.
Well, it's wonderful, Hangang Parks. There are a number to choose from. My personal favorite is the Yeouido Hangang Park because it's relatively close to my house and there's plenty of things to do there for adults and kids as well. So highly recommended from me and I'm sure from you as well, Min-sun. But we do know that a great many foreign visitors to Seoul come here because they love K-pop and they want to come to the home of K-pop. Are there any specific places they can go via subway and which station should they get off at?
Of course, staying on the same subway line 3 or using the Bundang line, visitors can get off at Apgujeong station. So there is a specially created street for K-pop fans called K-Star Road. Along with many luxury shops, these colorful dolls called Gangnam Doll are on display. Fans can walk around to find the dolls that represent their favorite groups like BTS, Girls' Generation, or EXO. It was created in this district because many entertainment companies are located in the area, and it's considered to be a birthplace for many K-pop artists. Many celebrities also shop there, so if you're lucky, you might bump into an actual K-pop star there.
So we came here for the K-pop Star Road because we like K-pop.
Yes.
And we just wanted to see the dolls and see the place.
The SM building.
Yeah.
Because I like EXO and I love NCT as well.
Me too.
Yeah, we like K-pop.
And we just want to take pictures. We just expect to have a good time. The weather is so nice.
And moving up some stations in northern Seoul, at Anguk Station on line 3, there are famous places like Royal Palaces, the Bukchon Hanok Village, and Samcheongdong-gil Road, where there are small cafes, art galleries, and quiet alleyways. A roughly 10-minute walk from the Hanok Village, visitors can get to Korea's presidential office, the Blue House. To tour inside the Blue House, you must make an online reservation, but visitors without a reservation can go to the water fountain in front of the presidential office. And there's a walking trail starting from the fountain leading to the other end of the Blue House. The walking trail used to be blocked from the public for almost 50 years, but now visitors can enjoy 24-hour access. There were a lot of tour groups enjoying themselves when I went there yesterday. So it's nice to check out Korea's top office as well if you're heading to the Bukchon Hanok village.
Well, Min-sun, I think we could spend a week going around Seoul, going to all the places you mentioned there. And when my family and friends come to visit me in Seoul, they are always blown away about how much there is to do in the South Korean capital. I truly believe that it is one of the best, if not the best cities in Asia, and I truly mean that. Thank you very much for your report, Min-sun. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you in the studio again very soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, that was a wonderful report there by Min-sun. Now we're going to take a quick look at some other cultural events here in Seoul that might be of interest to you.
Good morning. It's forecast to be a repeat of yesterday's weather conditions. A cool start to the day, but highs will jump more than 10 degrees Celsius by the afternoon. So daily highs will be ranging between 20 and 27 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Meanwhile, dryness continues with dry weather alerts in place for most parts of the country. In fact, Gangwon-do province is still at great risk of wildfires with a dangerous combination of wind and extremely dry conditions. Also, some upper regions could see some polluted air in the morning. Not too bad, but those sensitive groups will need face masks handy and keep an eye on the dust levels. We will notice rise in top temperatures, though, from today into the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news we have for now. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.